Okie doke. I'm sorry for my running around this morning. I didn't bring shoes. I am. I know, they got me doing all kinds of things around here. I know, lucky me. Yes. Yeah, I'll figure it out. Yeah. You are. I know. This is my crowd where I never know what you guys will say. No, just kidding. It's been really great, actually, this class. Every week I'm kind of like, I'm throwing a lot of stuff out there, and I'm wondering if it's seeping in or whatever, and then every single time you guys are willing to go wherever I'm going. So today with shoes, Arlo's teaching because he brought a visual aid. I didn't bring any of my shoes up here. Because most of them smell, I fear. So I didn't want to, and this is a communion table normally, so I didn't think that that's probably the best thing to do. But just to start us off today, I'm wondering if you have a favorite pair of shoes, if any of you are shoe people. What's it look like?
I just looked at them, and all of a sudden there were these sort of black patent leather heels, and at that time that big fat heel was coming out.
Yeah.
And so they were kind of dressy, and they had straps going this way and straps coming up that way. I thought these shoes were classy, and so I put those shoes on my side, put the shoes on, and I was just sort of walking around seeing how they felt, and my foot went around the corner before my body. And this boy said, "Oh, those shoes are so cute." And I thought, I looked and I thought, gee, she's talking about these shoes, I guess. And I looked and I thought, yeah, they are pretty cute. So I ended up and I bought those shoes, and to this day, they finally gave up the ghost.
Oh, no.
So it was not repairable as far as I knew. So that was the end of my shoes.
Ugh.
Okay.
Okay. One of the best compliments I ever got when I was in seminary, somebody, I didn't really know this person. It was my first year. They were a third year. So that's, they had been there forever. They were already sick of everybody at seminary, those seminary people. And she stopped me on our way to the library and she goes, "Hey, I thought I'd ask you, do you know where a cobbler is? Do you know who I can go to for a cobbler?" And I go, "I actually don't know, but I'm very flattered that you would think I was somebody who would know where the cobbler in town is." It was one of those things of like, well, I must wear shoes that people think I'm going to a cobbler for. I don't know. It was flattering, I would say, because it says something about when you take care of a shoe, right? My mom says, people buy their shoes. So I was instilled with that very early on. Any of you else have other shoe stories or shoe Bible stories that come up for you?
My wife always insisted that I polish my shoes twice a year.
Mm-hmm.
Because I would do it in the fall, my regular shoes in the
Uh-huh.
fall before school starts. And then in the spring, I polish my baseball shoes. Until she made me polish the other shoes.
The smell of shoe polish.
Yeah.
That's a Sunday morning smell to me. There's only, in my family, my dad's the only guy, so it was always him shining shoes. It was never, us girls had who knows what kind of shoes, some patent leather shoe that our mom put us in. But the smell of shoe, I'm trying to get us in there viscerally. What are the senses right now? Are your feet warm or cold? Are you wearing socks? Think about what your feet feel like. That's probably not something we think about regularly. We just, unless they hurt, and then we think about them a lot. So one of the first stories of feet that we think about would be, I didn't tell you to take off your shoes when you got here, and yet I could have. I've been in a class before where we had to leave all our shoes outside and then walk in because we were on holy ground together, right? This is on page 91. God speaks from the clouds and out of the burning bush. Our role is to respond by taking off our shoes and to recognize the holy when we experience it, to turn aside our gaze and humility, follow instructions, and listen. So do you take your shoes off in certain places? Have you ever taken your shoes off at church? Yeah?
We had a field trip from our church
Okay.
It was a mosque in Libertyville, not Libertyville, Northbrook, and we had to take our shoes off before we went in.
Yes.
What's the center area called?
The like praying room, yeah.
And before we could go in and pray.
Did you have to like wash your hands too?
I don't think they made us do that.
Okay, in mosques I've been to, there's little cubbies, right, where you put your shoes, you take them off. So if we were Muslim, before Sunday, it wouldn't be Sunday, it'd be Friday, I think. We'd go to church, but before in our narthex there'd be cubbies for all of our shoes. So maybe the 6 of you can do that, and you at home can do that this morning. I'll keep mine on. That's probably best. I probably shouldn't preach without shoes on today. I might get some questions. They might question whether I should be here. So this verse from Isaiah is also found in Peter, I believe. It's a quote later on in the New Testament, but this is the original. How beautiful are the feet of the messenger who announces peace, who brings good news, who announces salvation, who says to Zion, your God reigns. So that was one of the feet stories I was thinking of. How beautiful are the feet, right? My grandpa had to have some feet surgery regularly. I remember this as a child. And my mom, it was her father-in-law. She would say, how beautiful are the feet, and then she'd say, except your grandpa's. That's not true about his, right? Because we don't think of, our feet are something that we use, right? We don't think about them as beautiful necessarily. What other stories of shoes or feet do you think of other than Abraham? Are there any that come up? I'll take you to a few, so don't worry about it. There's that one about John the Baptist saying that he looses, he's not even, he shouldn't even loose the foot or the strap of the sandal of the Lord, right? When you're early in learning how to do Greek, that's one of the easy words, loose. So I know that verse even though I didn't ever quite understand what that meant. What does it mean that we're not worthy to loose the sandal strap of our Lord? What did John the Baptist mean by that?
Well, to unlace someone's shoes puts you in a suppliant position.
Mm-hmm.
You're down below and they're above. You're essentially, what John is saying is, I'm not even worthy to be down there.
Yeah.
And I guess you say Eastern Europe.
Mm-hmm.
For example, Tsar Ivan the Terrible, it was, the ones who came to ask things of him would put their heads low and they would pick up one of his feet and put it over their head. He's completely in control.
Oh, like the foot, like I am underneath the foot of this ruler.
Exactly.
Huh.
So
Interesting, yeah.
saying that there was more than just a loosening of
Mm-hmm.
the strap. There was a position of
Yeah.
the Lord and him.
Yeah, and at the time, of course, people were looking at John the Baptist and saying, you're the Messiah, right? People were looking at John the Baptist out in the desert. Baptize me, I'm repenting, this is the new kingdom I'm part of. And John is saying something very specific. He says, I'm not even, don't even look at me as a servant of the Lord. I'm far past that. I mean, the Lord who is to come is going to be way more than meets the eye. That made me think, I was at a youth conference once, so I was probably in high school or middle school. And you know the verse in Roman, the God will soon crush Satan underneath your feet. You know this verse in Romans? So all of us youth group kids wrote that verse on the bottom of our shoes, and we were just walking around with that on our shoes. So that's one way to interpret something. Different tradition, of course. We were doing some literal stuff. But I was thinking of another, oh no. Okay, I want you to see this picture, so it needs to come up. I was thinking of another story. We'll get it another way. I was thinking of, I saw this at the Episcopal church I go to on Sunday afternoons, where I get to do a little just normal church myself, to have a little place. I saw this on the wall the other day. This is from Sanctified Art, which I know we've used a few times around here. But this is the story of the woman anointing Jesus's feet with her hair and her oil, right? Does it seem different to you, this picture, when you look at it? Is there anything that like pops out?
I mean, probably the fact that the leg is black.
Yeah.
That would be the first thing, maybe.
Yeah. You know, I just saw something that said, if there's any guess whether the people in the Bible are white, look at how many times they rub oil on their head. These are not people, I mean, my hair's a little bit more needing oil than most white people, but look at the way that her hair, her black hair, is cleaning these feet with the oil, right? It's different than a lot of our very Caucasian-looking Jesuses and Marys, or whoever this woman was. In John's Gospel, it's Mary, mother or sister of Martha, who washes the feet. Anything else that's coming out to you?
It is a tear, isn't it?
It looks like it. Yeah. George, do you see something? I have the artist was Lauren Wright Pittman, and this is what she wrote about this scene. When I was little, I would run around my grandparents' yard barefoot, playing tag, basketball, or intense battles of tetherball. All of the residue from our adventures would stick to the bottoms of my feet until they almost became one with the ground. I would come inside and my grandmother would quickly call me to the bathroom so that she could wipe my feet off with a warm wash rag. I love the feeling of warm water against my feet, the texture of the wash rag scratching away the grime of the day, and the hands of my grandmother lovingly squeezing my feet. When I was preparing to paint this image, I propped my phone up against a wall, started recording, and knelt down on the ground, pretending I was washing Jesus' feet. My face was so close to the ground with all the dust and dog hair that clings to my rug, and I began to run my fingers through my hair, washing an imaginary foot. My dog Rumi came over, plopped herself down in front of me, and I began to pretend wash her paws. I giggled to myself and called to my husband, asking if he'd lend his feet to the scene. I quickly said to him, "But please don't take off your shoes." I didn't want to experience his feet that close to my face. After all, it was winter, and feet tend to be a little more ripe after a long day in woolly socks. I began to rub my hair over his booted foot, and I felt this profound sense of vulnerability and discomfort. The image of me kneeling at as my husband sat in a comfortable chair was a difficult one for me to see reflected back to me. I wasn't even willing to fake wash my husband's bare feet. The amount of love it took to do this act willingly seems astronomical to me. I then asked my husband to take off his shoes. As I rubbed my hair on his feet, I felt like crying. This is the posture that Jesus calls all of us into, a profoundly uncomfortable, shocking, reverent position, coming face to face, intimately engaging with the residue of Christ's footsteps to smell and almost taste the journey of Christ. How about that when you look at this again? Or did that make you think about that story differently? I know this is a Holy Week story. We're getting very close because it happens during the week of Passover. So before Maundy Thursday, before the Last Supper. Anything come up?
It's interesting that in the Catholic sacrament of extreme unction, the priest puts oil on the forehead, on the hands, and on the feet.
Really? I didn't know about the feet one.
That's,
On all the places. I thought her ability to think about that story, I mean, I'm not an artist, I don't go off and paint things all the time, but something about her trying to do this story that she's heard before, right? She knows this story. She's obviously going to paint it. So she knew what she was getting herself into, and yet it struck her when it actually was there. So I'm not saying go home and kiss each other's feet or paint each other's feet, but what does it look like to serve each other like that when it gets dirty? She says the woolly socks, right? After a long day in socks, what do we do with each other? How do we love each other? Okay. So, of course this was about shoes this week, but I went to a few other stories. I said, we're not just going to do shoes, we're going to do clothes. Put on the shoes, right? So this is from Ephesians. It's the last bit of Ephesians. And I'll read it to you. I know that that's small. Listen for the things that we put on. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Therefore, put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground, and after you have done everything, to stand. Stand firm then, with the belt of truth buckled around your waist, with the breastplate of righteousness in place, and with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. In addition to all of this, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all of the flaming arrows of the evil one. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. And pray in the Spirit on all occasions, with all kinds of prayers and requests. With this in mind, be alert and always keep on praying for the Lord's people. Did you hear all the stuff that we have to put on? This is a good, if you're ever bored and would like to do a little study, each of these things means something. You have in front of you, I hope you saw the other side of your handout, this, but made bigger. It's pretty small, right? So what are all the things that we're supposed to put on? And what does Paul have in common with my big fat Greek wedding? Can you guess just off the top of your head? Remember how I've said that I'm trying to teach you to be like Mr. Portocalis, who makes everything Greek. So how is Paul doing that when it comes to God? What does he see? Paul writes this when he's in jail, right? He sends this letter to the church in Ephesus, and he's writing from jail. So what does he have to look at? Some guards, right? What would be there? The only, people with him, of course, but when he's looking outside, what does he see? The guards. He sees the guards. That's the thing he's been looking at. He tries to write this letter to the Ephesians and give them hope, give them something to press forward towards, right? That's Ephesians. Keep on the endurance part. And he has the guard's outfit. And he says, how will I make this thing that I'm looking at, how can I think about it in a different way? So each of these things have a different idea, right? The helmet of salvation, this would have been a helmet that looks like this. It protected the head and necks from attacks. So something that you'll see about all of this, all of the, armor, is it's always forward motion. There's never they never retreat, right? None of the armor that you're wearing is for retreating. It's always for pressing forward towards them, right? So you have a breastplate that, of course, guards your vital organs, but it's also this breastplate of righteousness. The iron or bronze scaled armor was built in 4 sections to cover each side, right? So that's what he saw. The sword of the Spirit, he would have seen that sword, and he also would have known that back in the Old Testament, God says that he would turn our swords into plowshares, right? So is Paul really saying use this sword against each other? Is the Bible supposed to be something we use against each other? I don't think that's what Paul's trying to say. I think he's saying, that sword, the sword that, Peter uses in the final days of Jesus? We're going to use it differently. We're going to use it as a sword of the Spirit that pierces us, not with blood, right? But gets to our hearts. Each one of these, the shoes especially, since it's supposed to be shoe week, we look at these little sandals. These sandals, I remember gladiator sandals for me in middle school were very big. I don't know if you all have lived through several iterations of a gladiator sandal as fashion, but I feel like they're not in vogue currently, but they probably will be in the next 5 years. But the shoes that they would have worn, the shoes that, Jesus would have worn a similar shoe, right? There's not many shoes out there, not many shoemakers, cobblers. The shoes that Paul asks us to put on are for readiness, to prepare the way for the gospel of peace. So these aren't, these are shoes to guide you into peace, right? Is there anything about this armor of God that you have ever learned that you think is important for us to get out there, that has changed for you over the years? Yeah.
When we were at Patriots Walk, at the fortresses, they have little museums. One of the things that they point out to there is that among all of the artifacts that they are an incredible number of shoes. These sandals, they call them sandals here, they were tough shoes.
Yeah.
They blasted in the dirt for 2,000 years.
That's true.
In northern England. And they're still there. I mean, you can see them in museums.
Yeah.
The cloth material, like the tunic, you don't see those.
Uh-huh.
They rotted away centuries ago, but the shoes are still around.
Yeah.
Because to those Roman soldiers, those shoes, it's sometimes the difference between life and death.
Yes.
It was very important.
Hi, George.
I seem to remember a story that Lisa Favor or something like that, where people didn't have shoes and they talked to the king and said, "What are we? My feet are hurting." And the king said, "I'll issue an edict that will cover all the land with leather, and your feet won't hurt anymore." They were starting on this intense project when some little kid spoke up and said, wait a minute, what if we put that leather on our own feet and each one be independent and protect themselves rather than the country providing protection? I think that was the message that
At the time. I've never heard that. That's an old war story, I think, George. I'm going to look it up, though. Leather, feet, shoes, land. That's what I'll fable. I remember when I was in college, this was one of the first things that we really studied because there's so much to get into. You could have a lesson each week on one of these pieces of armor, on one of the things. So if you're ever in the need for a good Bible study, this one can take you years and years. There's a lot of put-ons and there's a lot of stand firms, right? What does it mean to stand firm when you have shoes of peace on? None of my pictures are showing up today. This is what it looked like. It looked like this. It wasn't too important, but So I was thinking about put on, and then I was thinking about Maundy Thursday, the day where we get back to washing each other's feet, where Jesus washes our feet. For I have set you an example that you should also do as it has been done to you. Can I have one of those? I don't have the reading. So in John 13, which you have in your hands, is the story of Jesus washing the disciples' feet. We'll celebrate this next Thursday, not this one, but the next one. But my undergrad really took this seriously. And seriously in a symbolic way. What does that mean, seriously in a symbolic way? But the take up language, the do what I just did kind of language, my undergrad kind of ran with it. So I'm going to show you a video it's probably used for admissions. This is one of my professors who is an ethics guy. He knows the Bible. He knows what it means to care for each other. And it's a short video, but listen to how it's put to practice what Jesus does here. And then we'll talk a little bit about it. I forgot to tell you. The towel, he already mentioned it. When I graduated from college, there has been a tradition for years and years, over 50 years, of giving a towel at graduation. You get a Bible and you get a towel and you get your diploma when you walk up there. So the towel is this idea and a physical thing that we all know about when you're a freshman. So think about that. Sorry.
Monday, Thursday, the night of the show, where John said, knowing that everything is good, he steps down and takes off his big clothes, and he wraps a towel around his waist, and he goes about the lowly business, the degrading business of servant, cleaning dirt and sweat and smell of the disciples' feet. And it's around the countercultural that announces that the way of the world, the elite and the lesser and the lowly, are bound to service to the great and the powerful and privileged and none the other way around. And so that is, and I was thinking, deeply at odds with the fabric of God's woven reality. And so the fabric of the towel represents the fabric of reality, the love, beauty, and self-giving love. That we were made to find our fullness in being, giving and receiving to and from others in love, enable the mystery of Christ, the overflow of His coming. In fact, we go further and see that the towel not only symbolizes the event in the mystery of Christ, but it symbolizes His very being as the incarnation of God. He became human. He wrapped Himself in the towel of our humanness, taking on human nature, that we might be clean and renewed as He allows His own humanity, that towel, to be saturated by all of our dirt, even unto death, even unto the humiliating death of the criminal on the cross. The reason that reality is soaked in the beauty of God is because that is who God is in His triune being. God's very being is a giving and receiving power. It is the life of perfect humility and wholeness and freedom, where all power is poured out for the blessing of the other, Father, Son, and Spirit. It is a perfect communion, a singularity of diversity. The Father, Son, and Spirit give and receive life in and from each other. So what does this mean for us practically here today? around us, the principal actor is God himself. There's one power bearer of Deerfield University, and that is Jesus Christ himself. If we're going to be an intentional community, let us be intentionally a community that symbolizes our purpose. When we open ourselves up to the ministry of Christ, it enables us to abandon our fragile roles of ego, which would hide our dirt, which would keep us away from the dirt of others. As Christ serves us, we are opened up ourselves, our true selves, realizing that full well that this is a long and difficult journey and that we have holes in our sandals. And if we have the expectation, pretend that this is going to be an easy and quick clean, we fool ourselves about the extent of our own dirt, or more likely, we haven't glimpsed yet the full heights of the beauty that God has in mind for us. After all, the idea is full communion with God. Nurtured by Christ, we're enabled and freed more and more to be involved with our good or God's good and joy lives. We're also enabled more and more to be enduring, committed, gracious, patient, and courageous in our service of them. Not out of need or want, not out of need to prove ourselves or worthiness of our sacrifice, but out of a desire to join God in what He's doing. Out of a desire to be in sync with biblical reality, symbolized by a service.
I don't always stand by everything that my undergrad has done or says, but I do, something that they really did instill is this idea of servant leadership, that in order to care for each other, we do have to get messy, that this towel idea isn't just an idea. So at some point when I was there, somebody made the realization that we got these towels at graduation, and they were like, you couldn't clean with them, right? They were, they're pretty. Right? They were, a fabric kind of like this, something that you couldn't actually clean with. And so somebody raised that of like, well, if this whole servant leadership thing is true, if this towel thing is more than an idea, then why don't we get towels when we're freshmen that we can actually clean with? Why aren't they like dish towels that we just have with us? And that changed. And I was a discipleship person, so I have like a bunch of extras. So I have a bunch of them, and I clean with them, and I see them regularly. So did anything come out of that, or looking at this John passage, plus the picture that we saw earlier? Let me try to put it up, remind you what it looked like. Is there anything that is standing out to you about the physical things that remind us about how to care for one another? Well, I'll leave us with, none of these pictures are showing up today. Let's see what it said. Well, I know that this is something we won't get to. I can send you guys this link if you'd like to, because I can think about all of you here. If you're online, I can send it to you as well. But this is another foot washing video. I don't know if you guys know about this, but this is Mr. Rogers, who is, of course, Presbyterian, PCUSA minister, right, from Pittsburgh. And on his show, he uses a pool to show how people, regardless of race, are the same, right? So this is an actor who's playing a cop. At the time, yes. Oh, sorry. Well, at the time, a lot of the story, pools were not segregated, or were segregated. They weren't integrated yet. So this was Mr. Rogers doing something about that. So there's a pool underneath there. And this is actually a video about the making of this thing. So this officer talks a little bit. This actor, talks a little bit about this. But he uses the idea of foot washing. I think about Mr. Rogers, Fred Rogers, as a pastor. Do you think there's any way he put his foot in that pool without thinking about the story of Jesus washing his feet? It has to be something he was thinking about. That is in the water. Accidental in the water. That is within his mind as he's thinking about this. As he's thinking, what can I do to change the public perception of race in this country? Man, that is not coming up. Let's see if I can make it come up. The last thing, it's way too small, and I should turn it off. But the last thing, just this week as you go, you're going to put shoes on, I bet, even house shoes. I'm a big house shoe person nowadays, so I always have shoes on. This week, I hope that when I put on my shoes, I can think of the things that God is calling me to do while in them, that I think about the path that God has me on, and I pray that you do as well. Thank you. Next week, the rest, because we're not having anything on Easter. So you'll see that it's way more reading. So if you can continue to read it, but I will be talking about a smattering of things rather than just one. Because I believe oil is technically next week. But then in Holy Week, you know that there's a lot of symbols to go through. So I'll be taking us several places. Okay?